morning, everyone. I am speaking about a topic that I think probably some of you guys are familiar with. I'm not sure. Has anyone in this room heard no before? You guys all get yeses? No? Oh, conversation's over. I don't need to teach you anything then. In my experience, no's were pretty common. I am actually the CEO, as I was just introduced. I'm the CEO of One Page. My name's Joanna Weidenmiller. I was lucky enough to be born and raised in San Francisco, and I still live there today. But I've lived all over the world and started One Page in my pajamas in my apartment 3.5 years ago, and today it's public for over $500 million. So I did that by one way. And that way, just going to shock you guys, the secret to how I did that is no. I heard no all the time. And I didn't start just hearing no as I started building a company. It wasn't that. I actually started hearing no at a really young age. I heard no from the beginning. I was told I'd never go to college by my high school teacher. I was told that I wasn't going to make the team in rowing, which was my sport. And that was, for me, it was always that challenge of people kind of saying, you're not going to do it. And I guess early on, my parents were always like, they don't make up the rules. They're just telling you can't to see if they can push you down and see if you can't overcome that. It's kind of the opportunity ahead of you. And as I went on, that kind of stuck in my head, which is, how am I going to take this no and actually turn it on its head and flip it around and turn that into a yes? And now I seek out no's in a lot of ways. It is the no's that have taught me to build One Page. I built One Page not on the yeses, but on the no's. I ended up doing okay. I was full scholarship to University of Virginia. I was also on the national team for rowing. I was recruited into the FBI right out of college. After about 1.5 years, I left the FBI and I became an entrepreneur. And I did that because I found out that for me, as I evaluated myself and as I evaluated my journey ahead, one of the big things that stuck in my mind was that I was completely driven by performance. I was desperate for the challenge. I wanted someone to say no to me. I wanted someone to tell me that I couldn't do it. I wanted an opportunity to prove myself. And that whole model of performance wasn't something that you get at the Bureau. When I joined the FBI, they told me every single day I'd be promoted and the day I'd have to retire, which was 25 years later, down to like Tuesday, October 25th. I'm like, I can't make this go faster or slower, or this is how it works for the next 25 years. And that wasn't right for me. And so I became an entrepreneur. I also did something else crazy. I fell in love with somebody, and he worked in China. He's American, but he worked in China. And very quickly after falling in love, we moved to China. And so I actually started very much my entrepreneur career. After I sold my first business, I actually moved to China and went on and built the rest of my businesses, heavily building One Page. Now, in China, what was interesting is you learn a lot about kind of how big the world is. And I would say that because that opportunity, because I understood what globalization was for the first time and global warming, I understood what freedom of speech was. I understood what opportunity was. I understood how amazing it was to be born an American with the education that I had. It was the equivalent of winning the biological lottery, and that I had this amazing opportunity to go do it. And I went on in life as I left the FBI. I started my first business at 22. I sold it by the time I was 24, moved to China, built a mobile e-commerce company, ventured that with the Chinese government. And as I was doing all these things, one thing that happened was, and this is the beginning of my story, is where One Page came from is that my father, when I graduated high school, wrote me a book. It was his Secrets to Business. And it had been in kind of ingrained in me, and those were his secrets in business were how to write a business plan in one page, and how to get someone to say yes to that. Now, I didn't think much of it at the time, but a friend of mine's mom was running HarperCollins, and ended up she saw the book, read the book, and she was like, I'm going to go publish this. My dad, not thinking that anything would happen, it went on to the New York Times all-time best-selling list, became bestseller in the US, China, Korea, and Japan. And it's still an Amazon top 100. It's called the One Page Proposal. And that was the beginning of the idea and the core concept of One Page, because as I went on in my own life, what happened was that I was using the principles of One Page, but at the same time, communication was changing. And it didn't matter if I was in China or if I was traveling in Africa or if I was in the United States, people needed to get information faster. And we wanted to be able to provide a communication platform that allowed people to talk about their ideas in a way that they could get that done very quickly. But we also wanted to target a very specific demographic. That was job seekers. This is kind of that beginning part of understanding what you're doing. But job seekers had a marketing tool back in the day. It was called a resume. I'm sure we all still seem to think that we have resumes, but there's actually last year there were 12 billion resumes sent to 5 million companies just in the US alone. 12 billion. I mean, this is almost like 2 per person on the planet. There's nobody reading these resumes, which is shocking to a lot of people to understand, but there are companies that literally get 10,000 resumes a week that we work with. And we wanted to build a new communication tool because companies would come in and we'd go, who are you looking for? They'd go, we're looking for people that aren't afraid to hear no, that are going to defy odds, that aren't afraid to fail, that have grit, and that are entrepreneurs and have great ideas. And we're like, where's that on the resume? I'm sorry, I'm missing this in the bullet point list. It's Stanford, Harvard, you over here, 5 years of experience. You guys have that as a criteria, but not the rest of the stuff that you have over here. So we wanted to build a communication platform that allowed people to tell their ideas. So companies would put out challenges and candidates would compete to solve the challenge to win a job on a one-page job proposal. And that was kind of the beginning of One Page. This was the start of it. It was in a way for companies to assess talent, to get from the noise all the way down to those that made a difference based on those that had innovation. As I looked at my own life, one of the things that mattered to me was that I had defied odds. I stand up here today, I'm a public CEO of a tech company. I don't look the part. I've never looked the part. It's not that no one went like, oh yeah, you're going to be an athlete. Like, you're going to be a tech entrepreneur. It's like, I didn't come out of that going, yeah, I have everything kind of set up for me. At the same time, I had passion and I had determination and I had grit. And I think for me, and that's one of the things that I've been rewarded by investors and those that did say yes, was they saw that and they wanted to have that involved. And One Page wanted to go, when we went to market, I didn't know anything about HR. And I knew that I was kind of up against me in the first place. So we went and we actually studied with all the top heads of HR, what were their problems in hiring? What were the systems built? We built this with windows around our office. We didn't build this in a box. And therefore, when we launched, we actually went out. Our average client size today is 39,000 employees. We deal with the biggest and best companies in the world. My average client hires about 1,000 people a month. So we now deal with a lot of hiring needs. But the other thing that happened was I started listening to my own employees. Everyone tells you that the people you hire, Michael Dell was saying, talent is what allows you to be successful. That's going to determine a company's success. When you're a startup, not only are investors not saying yes, but people aren't starting to work for you. Like, you don't get this superstar to leave Google or leave wherever and all of a sudden join your company because it's still a dream. You still have to prove yourself. You still have to raise money. And so I stole this from my CRO. I have to give him credit for this, but he said you can hire 2 types of people. You can hire American Idols, those that are standing on the side of the street and they're strumming along and they're getting collected pennies and they turn into Kelly Clarkson or Taylor Swift. Or you can hire Celine Dion and every day she's going to sell out for you. Every day you're going to get the entire audience is going to be booked. She's going to be amazing, but she's super expensive. And as a startup, when you have an idea, you are just searching for those American Idols. You are looking at them. You're finding people that have this glimmer that haven't yet been given that opportunity. And a lot of the guys from the early days were that. They're American Idols. I have the honor of getting to still work with them today. But that's really what we were searching for. We were searching for people that had the same universal identification as us around what we were doing. And that was to remove all bias in hiring. We didn't believe that people should be evaluated based on what they've done, but rather what they can do for a company. That's kind of the motto of what we started with. But I also started listening to all those people. I started listening to my team. One of the things they kept telling me is they were like, we have to own sourcing. We need to be able to actually not just assess talent, we need to be able to find the talent. If we could find the talent and own the talent, then we'd be able to be successful. And so that's where I actually realized that there was a company I wanted to buy, and the company was slightly controversial, but it had raised $50 million from Excel. small hope. Like, if I could buy that company, everything would be great. Well, I'm still at this point. I'd raised our seed round. We raised $3 million. My first million came from an investor who said, if you work as hard as you work this room to raise money, I'm going to be extraordinarily wealthy. And right there, that's when he gave me my first million. And at that point, you guys, I'd heard 210 no's. 210. So all of those no's, one of the big things that I did is I had a lot of people asking me, well, what do you do when you hear no? I would be like, why are you saying no to me? Like, what's not good about my business? And I kept listening to them, and I kept being better and better and better at it. But another thing that I wanted to do is I knew that if we had the capability to buy this business, that it would change everything fundamentally for all of talent acquisition, which is hiring. So we did something extreme. We went public. We didn't go public in New York. We went public in Australia, which is one of the investment banks has a great quote on the research report, which is an American unicorn in kangaroo clothing, which is very true. We are an American company, but the reason Australia was important was because being public allowed me to do that. Being public allowed me to actually buy Branch Out, which was a company I wanted to buy. On top of that, I was introduced to the idea of listing by my husband, who had done a deal in Australia, and was like, "Hey, you should talk to these guys. Tech's really taking off in Australia, and you should talk to them and see about potentially listing to get this all done." And at first, I was like, "A list in Australia? Like, is there even a stock exchange there? Like, what?" Well, the more I learned about Australia, the better it became. Australia, you didn't have to have the $200 million valuation you have to have if you're listed in New York. You didn't have to go through all the different criteria just to get there and all the burden. But on top of that, I could actually get evaluated based on on the market. I was like, if I'm building something for all of people to get jobs, like, why not be public? Why sit there with one VC in a room who's going to tell you what you can do? On top of that, not only did it allow me to buy a company, but on top of that, I also we still are going to list in New York, but I can do that right off of the bat of the ASX. Our investor base, only 10% of all our investors are in Australia. The rest are in New York and Boston and Hong Kong, which we're really lucky about. So it doesn't prevent me from having the same investors I would have had in New York. I don't pay the massive fees that you'd be paying if you're listed in New York. But at the same time, what was interesting is this. One page against those 210 no's, and a lot of people that were like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Listed in Australia, well, all of a sudden everyone started to follow us. We were about 100 companies that followed us after we listed. We are the first Silicon Valley tech company to list in Australia. About 100 followed us last year alone, from October to the end of the year. And this year there's hundreds in the pipeline, and it's very much an opportunity of different kind of investment. And it's saying, I'm going to take the no's, I hear what you're saying, but I'm also at the same time going to apply it into what the ultimate goal that I'm going after. So it's kind of like, just sit there busting down the nose to get to the ultimate goal. In the last year, what's been really interesting is that we have completely defied odds. One page has, over the last year, gone from a $25 million company, Aussie dollar, to $750 million Aussie dollar company. And it has been an extraordinary movement. We have, what investors like to say is we're an American unicorn, but doing it on a public exchange. No one said that before. No one's like, you know what, you're an American unicorn. We're not going to invest in you right now, but that's only because we don't invest in unicorns, and we're only looking for the guys that aren't going to be unicorns. I mean, everyone was like, this is the craziest idea I've ever heard. I bought a company, and we turned that into a platform that really disrupted quite a bit of, it really disrupted how people get jobs and how people get hired. And that was one of the big changes that we did that was really smart. Now today, being public is very different. Being a public CEO and being a private CEO, your job is different. Your team is different. The people that you represent are different. I look for talent that I spend a lot more time with with the Celine Dion's and the American Idols, but not, we now have an opportunity to really do that. I had great advice from somebody when I was pitching, and I wish I had heard the advice when I started pitching to VCs back in the day, and that was, I did my pitch, and it's very cool. The head of Oracle Cloud is here. His name's Sean Price, and he used to run a company called SuccessFactors, which is in our industry. very large company. SAP bought him for $3 billion. And he said, he goes, okay, great, tell me your roadshow pitch, your IPO pitch. Tell him, and he goes, that's the worst pitch I have ever heard. Like, nobody's going to give you money. Like, you're not going to, this is like not going to be a successful IPO roadshow. And this is right before we were listing. And I was like, well, why is that? And he goes, nobody cares about your features and functionalities. Those will change. And as I look back in hindsight, it's always 2020, but as I look back in hindsight, yeah, my business moved from assessment to sourcing, all the ways and all the changes, the business model, everything changed. And I was going in there trying to explain click by click how my product worked, when in the end of the day, he was like, bottom line is this. It's a $456 billion industry. Every 2.4 years, people get new jobs. Around the world, there's 3 billion people in the workforce. In the United States, we turn over 46%. There are 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. And in the next 15 years, 75% of the workforce will be run by millennials. And you're right at the center of it. Just in the last year, this industry has grown $87 billion just in 1 year, 2014 and 2015. And learning, okay, I'm going to have to constantly talk big picture, but also bring it right down to how we're doing this in deliverables. It's been very successful for us being public, because what it's done is it's allowed us to actually focus. I think startups have a challenge, and when you get, we just raised $50 million last week. And as when you're like, oh my God, we can get stand-up desks and like Apple TV and all sorts of stuff that you can, it's actually Apple TV and stand-up desks that my company thinks we've made it. It's not like being listed or any of the other stuff. They're like, oh wow, now everything's really nice in here. But those are not the things that are actually what you want to spend all your money and time on. You don't grow for growth. When you're public, you grow for dollars. So you understand what's going to make money, but at the same time, remaining in the same core and the same vision of what you're doing. And I want to end by telling you guys that it is not about the no's. It's not about how many you're going to hear. You will hear a lot. I was lucky enough to be in Laguna Beach last week with Travis, and founder of Uber, and he had 7 years prior to founding Uber. 7 years. He spent raising $1 million. Took him 7 years to raise $1 million. And he had a $250 billion lawsuit against him in his last company. This is not, defying odds and overcoming objections is an opportunity to succeed. It is going to allow you to be where you are going to be. And I know that in a country, especially in Ireland, it's not the same as America. Failure's not rewarded nearly as much as it is in the United States. If you fail in the United States, it's almost like a badge of success. You have to remember, in startups, you don't follow those same rules. If you fail in a startup, very much are all of a sudden, you're going to take that learning process and you're going to go at it again and look at every no, not as a failure, but as just not yet. And today, I welcome the no's, whether that means my team's telling me no, whether that means that you guys say no, whether that means that an investor says no. I'm going to look at it and say, okay, how do we make that better and how do we do that better? So I guess just go out there, understand that this is a very common story, one that I love to share. I'm like spokesperson for the underdogs of people that hear no. And if you guys need any advice, let me know. I know I've sat across in this room similar to this not too long ago, about 3 years ago when I started One Page. So thank you so much. And that's it.